Hello. Today we are going to talk about Trinity Lancaster corpus. That is another corpus we haven't looked at yet, and it has a bunch of features that distinguish it from all the corpora we looked at before. At first, let's look at some general information on who and why made this corpus. This corpus was primarily made by Lancaster University and Trinity College London. They worked together with the Center for Corpus Approaches to Social Science. This is a learner corpus of second language spoken English, and it is a compilation of transcribed oral interactions between L1 and L2 speakers during General English Exam, GESE, graded examinations in spoken English. All the conversations were recorded in 2012-2018. This corpus represents language use in spoken tasks on various topics, and we will look at more specific tasks that were recorded a bit later. And the tasks were both monologic and interactive. The corpus includes over 2,000 second language speakers of different cultural and linguistic backgrounds. So it includes speakers from Italy, Spain, Mexico, Argentina, Brazil, China, India, Sri Lanka, and Russia. All the users were of different proficiency levels, from B1 to C2. Also, another great feature about this corpus is that it includes metadata about all the speakers that were recorded. The total number of words used in the corpora is 4.2 million, which is a lot for a spoken language corpus. More specifically, my part will be based on the creator of this corpus, Gablasova, and her article that describes the corpus and talks about its specific features. And you can see the title of this work on your screen right now. So, first let's talk a bit about spoken corpora and why they're so useful for us, for those who deal with second language teaching and second language acquisition. First of all, speakers have no possibility to edit the output afterwards, so whatever they said stays exactly like that, while in written corpora, obviously you can come back, you can change some things you didn't like, you can add some other words, you can basically edit your output. Second, speakers react to their interlocutors, since this corpus is based on interactions between second language users and those who were giving them the exam. There are obviously a lot of pauses, a lot of hesitations, and we can look at how the speakers planned their speech and how they produced it. Moreover, it allows researchers to look at the links between language use and cognitive processes. So whenever you hear a pause, that already tells you a lot about the speaker. It shows us what people think and how they think while they are producing their speech. So we can also analyze frequency of different patterns, of different structures, role of interpersonal factors, and all that allows us to look at the interdependency of linguistic, social, and psycholinguistic factors in language production. Based on the data used in this corpora, we can analyze language use and develop methodological materials for teaching actual language use. So it's based on how people actually talk and how they produce their language in a more or less natural environment. Plus, spoken interlanguage corpora are extremely rare and limited. There are really not so many of them, which is also cool. Now, key issues in corpus development. There are a bunch of them. The first one is representativeness. So there should be sufficient information about language samples and their collection method, with a description of all steps. That thing is pretty developed in the corpora we are talking about, and we will look at how exactly the authors approached this specific issue a bit later. The second thing is the amount of evidence. So what is important in a corpora? It's not just about the word count. Also, it is important to look at the number of text samples, at their size, the evidence about target linguistic features used in these texts, and the number of speakers. The number of speakers allows us to establish frequency of a pattern used there. So if a lot of users use a specific pattern, it is more likely to reflect a regularity in a language. Size of text is also important because words and structures are not distributed equally in all texts. Some of them are rare and they depend on the setting. Larger samples are important for such structures as collocations, for example, because you cannot trace them in smaller texts. Just because maybe the users just didn't get a chance to use them. Nature of task is also extremely important for us because it shows the specific control of the production, that is a specific topic chosen for the text and the task time that was given to the speakers. Process of transcription is another interesting thing because it is actually pretty difficult to transcribe text. So it is important to pay attention to non-linguistic and paralinguistic features, that is pauses, laughs, hesitations, and so on. This specific corpora also includes contractions, which is rare in other corpora, and the creators of the corpus used several transcribers who looked at the same topics. They had a huge decision log where they were always interacting with each other and they were making decisions together. Now let's talk about the variables taken into attention here. Speaker-related variables are probably the most interesting ones. One of the things they looked at was English proficiency. So English proficiency was determined based on speakers' performance in the exam, general English speaking exam, and in specific oral tasks. Also, linguistic and cultural background were taken into account. There were two major groups. There were a lot of other languages too, but the major groups are Chinese, Italian, Russian, and Spanish. And Spanish speakers were from different countries. And another large group is speakers of different languages of India, primarily Hindi, Gujarati, and Marathi. Sociolinguistic characteristics taken into account were age, gender, and education. People whose conversations were recorded range from school kids to retirement age people, and they have completely different educational background and completely different exposure to language, which is another factor that was taken into account. More specifically, age when the speakers were primarily exposed to English, and type of their exposure. So what courses they took, whether they used it at home or they used it somewhere else, whether they traveled or not. So as you can see, there are a lot of variables that were taken into account. Another important thing is the nature of setting. In this case, it was clearly defined because it was an exam setting, so semi-formal language was used that, however, depended on the specific tasks that the speakers were given. The specific tasks were presentation, interactive task, discussion, and conversation. As you can see from the table, not all the speakers were given the same tasks. That is, B1 level speakers were given only discussion and conversation tasks, B2 were given both of those and interactive tasks, and C1 and C2 speakers were given all four types of tasks. So for the first task, presentation, it was based on a prepared speech, on a prepared monologue, on a free topic. So speakers could choose anything they were interested in, and they were just supposed to present their monologue. There was absolutely no interaction. In the second type of task, discussion, it was still based on the pre-selected topic, but the examinee was asked a bunch of questions based on their presentation. So again, it was based on what they prepared, but there were some specific questions based only on the material that was given by the examinee. So it was more of a dialogic task, not monologic. In the interactive task, second language speakers were supposed to maintain the conversation, asking questions. They were given a topic and they were leading the conversation. So they were not asked any questions here. They were mostly just asking questions. In the conversation task, it was similar to that, but two topics of general interest were given to examinees, and they, together with the person who was giving them the exam, were supposed to talk about these topics. So as you can see, discussion and conversation were led jointly. That is, both the taker and the giver of the exam were participating in them, and the presentation and the interactive tasks were led only by the examinees. How can we use all that information? Well, first of all, it is all very useful for research on pragmatic lexical and grammatical features because it reflects the language as it is used, both by examinees and by the native speakers who are giving the exam. Another cool feature is that the creators of this corpus, they created a whole set of classroom activities and teacher notes that is based on corpus data, and you can find the link you see on your screen in your handout. You might want to go there and check it out. That is pretty cool. And now Odai will show you more specifically how the website works, and he will give you an example of how it can be used in research.